First of all, DK Metcalf going to the Steelers, they give up a second round pick. They're paying him a lot of money. Does that disappoint you that he's not a New England Patriot?
Yeah, a little bit. They've been chasing this, top of the depth chart coverage dictating wide receiver for a few years now. You can go back to that pursuit of DeAndre Hopkins in the summer of 2023, and whether it was him, Ridley, Brandon Ayuk, this felt like the timing felt as good as it has for them to make such a move, and the opportunity felt like it was their second round pick. Theirs was better than the Steelers. They have more cap space than any team in the league. Did he get maybe a little more money than he's worth? Sure, but we've talked about this a lot. If the Patriots want to bring in players, they're probably going to have to overpay. I thought Metcalf stylistically is a great fit with Drake Maye. I thought that would have made a lot of sense. I'm a little disappointed the Patriots weren't in on that. Now, maybe Metcalf was determined to, go back and play with Russell Wilson again, assuming he re-signs in Pittsburgh. That's something obviously the Patriots couldn't match, but short of
I
that.
don't think so. I think the Steelers gave a second round pick. You would have given the fourth pick in the second round for DK Metcalf?
Yeah. I don't think you're drafting a player better than Metcalf there. Like, you're not getting more out of that pick in my mind, especially if it's just that pick.
And you're okay with spending the money required in order to retain his services?
Yeah, they for where they're at, cap-wise right now, they would still have a ton of flexibility to do a lot of what they need to do moving forward.
Okay, so you don't I'm not arguing with you. Just don't value that second pick and the control you get more than you do bringing in the improvement that DK Metcalf would give to this team over the time that he's here.
In this specific draft where they're at right now, I would have moved that pick, yeah.
Okay, so is this running counter because there must be some reason why they're not following your logic here, Barth? I mean, obviously, you have the answer. Does it run counter to what they're trying to do, which is what we were talking about earlier, work on the offensive line, and everything else will be on the defensive side of the ball? Or I'm not saying they're going to ignore the receiver position, but seems like so far that might be their plan of attack.
I think it's some of that. I also think, to your guys' point, and I apologize, I forget which report it was coming out of the combine, but they talked about how the Patriots viewed, Chris Godwin as somebody they could go after because unlike Metcalf or unlike T. Higgins, you don't have to part with the draft capital. You're only parting with the money, and you still keep those draft picks in that control. So I wonder if they really like Godwin and they look at it and they say, the gap between the two is not worth, and Godwin's still going to probably get a lot of money on the open market. He's the best receiver available. I don't think he's going to get 33, but it's going to be well north of 20, I would expect. Do they look at it and say, for the gap between the players, it's not worth giving up that second round pick?
Okay, I see the logic there. I guess I understand it. I wonder what they're thinking about in terms, and this is something I go back and think about when it comes to the quarterbacks who have been here before Drake, whether it was Mac Jones and certainly with Cam Newton. I wonder what their expectations are in terms of his development, what he's going to be able to utilize in terms of offensive weapons. We know that probably don't have enough right now in order to compete, but do you think the team is hesitant to spend a lot of resources right now on surrounding Drake Maye with weapons if they're not sure what he's going to be able to do with them?
That could certainly, you're saying like it's only 1 year and they need to see more before they really push the chips in the middle of the table.
Not even necessarily for him and his talent, but maybe they don't know what would be best suited for him right now. If they're going to expend the resources, whether it's a draft pick for Metcalf and the money that's going to be required afterward, but they need to know specifically what Drake Maye is best going to be able to work with, and maybe they don't know that yet.
Sure, that could be part of it. I think historically, the quarterbacks that play sort of Drake Maye style work well with those downfield, 50-50 ball receivers. So there might be a tie there. But yeah, if they're saying, well, we don't know, we may want to prioritize route running. We may want to prioritize, yards after the catch, whatever it may be. Yeah, if they're still not sure what they want to prioritize at the position, if they don't know what they want to prioritize at the position, then yeah, you wouldn't make that massive move yet because you don't want to invest in a guy you're not sure you're going to want him.
What this comes down to for me, Alex, is it's plain to see the Patriots are all in on offensive and defensive line depth. This is not going to be a sexy day for the Patriots coming up.
Yeah, and ultimately I'm okay with that. I had said, honestly, before Ronnie Stanley signed, I'd said as into the idea as I am of them adding DK Metcalf, Ronnie Stanley's the guy, and he's not available, but that philosophy still holds. They're not going to be able to do everything they need to do this offseason. There's too much. Even with all the assets they have, they can do a lot, but they're not going to be able to do everything. And if they were to say it's a weak year for wide receivers, we're going to hammer the trenches and build from the inside out, and the next year in a better wide receiver year, then we'll check that box. Like that, that strategy works to me. Like that makes a lot of sense. You still need to do something at receiver, maybe a guy like a Darius Slayton, right? Or, picking somebody later on day 2 in the draft. But if they are just going to go in and fix the trenches and work on the rest next year, I could see that line of thinking.
So speaking of defensive line, a small trade for the Patriots this morning. Devon Godchaux goes to New Orleans for a 7th-round draft pick next year. It's not even this year. You remember they offered him the chance to go out and find something. This is apparently what they found.
No, so that's well, I can't believe they gave up that 7th-round pick next year.
I know.
Well, that's no good. All right, so look, do you think that the cap raising this offseason, the way it did, kind of screwed the Patriots a little bit?
I don't think a ton, maybe on the margins, but if any player with even a decent agent is just going to ask for a certain percentage more money.
Well, no. What I mean is that teams are able to retain the players that they want easily. Like, because if you look at who's available in free agency now, it's not great.
Right.
I mean, say you wanted to build through the trenches, you're you're so terrible that obviously anything you do is going to help. But in your opinion, is there anything that stands out to you as being like a real difference maker in the trenches?
In the trenches, I mean, some of the guys that got cut, maybe Bosa's still out there. He isn't signed. And that's a shot in the dark because he's been banged up, but like he can be. On the cap thing, I think this wasn't even the few guys that have resigned. This wasn't projected to be a strong free agent class. It never was before the cap went up. I think what we're seeing is a product of weak free agency class, weak draft. Teams know if they move on from players, they're not getting replacements. And I think that is ultimately the driving force behind all these re-signings is there's simply nobody out there. If you're trying to kind of reset your roster, the Seahawks doing this right now is kind of wild because it's probably the worst offseason you could have to start a rebuild. So I think that's sort of what's driving it because, there's some guys that'll be, they'll help you out, but game-changing players, impact players, the one really on the market right now to me is Javon Holland, the safety, who I actually wouldn't hate the Patriots signing because he's a deep safety. He's not a box safety like the rest of the guys they have. After him, though, there's guys that'll help. There's guys that can be starters, but they're not going to make like that massive difference.
Would you assign Godwin?
At this point, probably the medical stuff worries me. He's coming off the dislocated ankle, only a couple years removed from an ACL. So you hope it's not another case where they sign a free agent off an injury and he's just not the same player. But if he's right, he's a great fit for what Josh McDaniels wants to do. I think he's a good fit with Drake Maye. I would sign him, not for the long term, but I would sign him.
How excited should I be for Harold Landry on a scale of 1 to Kyle Van Noy? Just.
I mean, he's a good signing. They needed to address the pass rush. He will help with that. He's familiar in the system. I think he's more of a known commodity in that you already know what the role is for him in the defense. You're going to be able to just kind of plug him in and let him go. They need more in the pass rush. To me, he's more of a secondary rusher at this point in his career, but he's a solid player. He's a good player. So I went to Kyle Van Noy, Anthony Jennings.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. All right.
Ringing endorsement.
Okay, so based on what's going to happen in free agency, and we'll get if we could keep you on after the break and talk about the draft. Based on what's available in free agency, how much better are the Patriots next year? Say they sign 2 offensive linemen and another defensive lineman, and they get the safety that you want. How much better are they next year?
Factoring in May's growth and Mike Vrabel and all that, I mean, they can. The tackle spot is what holds me up. I still don't think that there's anything definitive at tackle. Like if they can get average level tackle play, they with their weak schedule can probably get to maybe around 500. But if they're gonna have like marked improvement, it's gonna have to come through the draft.
Right, and we'll get to that. But yeah, so 500. That's pretty. I mean, that means that you're in the conversation in November.
8 and 9, and in the middle, end of November, we'll be talking about paths to the playoffs.
So
are we talking about like the ideal free agency?
Yeah,
like if they get a real left tackle, Godwin's healthy, Milton Williams is the same player he was in Philly, like all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But Alex, I would look at it as a big victory. Because the way I look at it is that in the beginning of December, if you're like in the conversation for making the playoffs, that's a big victory. Like if you're playing, meaningful in quotations, but you're playing games where there's an interest. If you win, there's still a chance of making the playoffs in December. I think that that's a victory for the Patriots next season, based on how the last couple seasons have gone, which have been dreadful. And there was nothing to look at. I mean, 2 years ago, that might be the most boring season of football I've ever seen. Like, no hyperbole. Like, that team might have been the most boring team. That last Belichick team might have been the most boring team I've ever seen. So now you got May. If you're talking about playing games in December, early December, where you're in the hunt, like you're still, around game or two out of the wild card, I think that's a huge victory for this team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, they were at 4 wins last year. I think Vrabel as a coach adds a win or two. You had another win or two off the free agency class, and that's kind of how I get to like 6 or 7, maybe 8. It would be they're not going to go 0 to 100. Like it's so hard to do that in the NFL, right? So just making that step towards you put it great there. Just play meaningful, relevant football in December. That'd be a great first step for where they're at.
Yeah, so the notion that this is like going to be the Commanders of last year and they're going to, go on some kind of run, it seems unlikely to you.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to really hit it out of the park in both the draft and free agency to get there.
And unfortunately, it's a bad free agent class and a bad draft. But look, maybe there's value later in the draft. We'll find out.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.